Hello, salam, namaste, and welcome to another session of grammar and usage mini lessons. This time again, we look at nouns, the gender of noun, the numbers involved in noun, and cases in nouns. Okay, starting off, what are genders in nouns or in the English language? If you look at yourself and the world around you, you will see that most of the living things, especially, have a male or a female form. Now, the male form is known as the masculine gender, and the female form is known as the feminine gender. And things which are not living, but physical things like chair, table, books, bed, etc., they which do not have a gender of male or female are considered neuter or genderless. Okay. Examples would be very easy. Boy is masculine, girl is feminine, king is masculine, queen is feminine, right? And there are words like child, parent, and royalty, which are genderless. Okay, when somebody says the child has come in, you do not know whether it's a male or a female. Similarly, when somebody says the word parent, you do not know whether we're talking about the father or the mother or some other caretaker, right? So in the living things, there is a male and a female. But what about things like the sun, the moon? What about seasons like summer and winter and spring, etc. Right? Though in these things and concepts there is no inherent gender, we human beings tend to think of them as other humans, and we associate a gender with them. So those things which have strength and violence associated with them are considered masculine. Why? Because typically that's what the male form is known for, right? Strength and violence and aggression, etc. And any object or concept where there is a concept of let's say beauty, grace, and gentleness, those objects or concepts are considered feminine, because typically, let's say, those are the qualities associated with the feminine form. Though it is very possible that the male form in the real world has some beauty and grace, and it's also possible that the feminine form has a lot of strength and violence and aggression, etc. But this is the historical view, that the male form is violent and aggressive and the female form is beautiful and graceful. So using these concepts also in the English language, certain things become male or female, which though in the reality do not really have a gender. As far as these things are concerned, which are genderless but are given a gender, the gender given in the English language might be very different from the gender given in your mother tongue or local language. So be aware of that. That's because of social and cultural context, etc., and point of views about life, right? Something which is very good in India might be very bad in England, right? So from that point of view, remember that we're talking about from the English point of view or the English culture point of view, what things are considered male and what things are considered female. Okay, moving on now to the formula stage of grammar. How do we change the genders of noun? Okay, where possible, where applicable, how do we go from one gender to another? There are various ways of doing it. Okay. The first way or the first method is that there are entirely a different word for the phenomena or the concept. So for the masculine or the male form of a sibling, the word is brother, but for the female form, the word is totally different and the word is sister. Words like husband, wife, father, mother, boy, girl, the word is entirely different in each form, in the masculine and the feminine form. Another very common way of changing genders, and this is more like the formula, because when the word was changing altogether, there was no logic to it. You just had to know the word. But here there is some kind of a formula or logic involved. What you do is you add the suffix s to it, right? So the host becomes hostess, lion becomes lioness, steward becomes stewardess. Another variation in this formula, which might feel like an exception but is nothing but the extension of the same rule, when you have a word like hunter or actor, where there is a vowel before the ending of the word, you remove that vowel for a better flow. Otherwise, the word would have become hunteress, right? Instead of that, the modern word become huntress. You remove the e and add the s at the end. Same thing for actor, the word becomes actress. it might feel like an exception, but if you look at the logic, it's the same logic. S is being added. The removal of E and the removal of O in hunter and actor is to just to make the word sound better and smoother. So that's the only logic there. I think this is the reason why most people are wary of grammar or learning grammar, is because of these rules, and always there are these exceptions. So you learn a formula, but 5 minutes later that formula is different. The reason for that is because the language developed first and grammar came later. From the observation of the language came the grammar, not the other way around. So there were various cultures and various ways of doing things, and all of them came together in a language, and that's why these various forms are there. But once or twice if you've gone through it, plus you're surrounded by the language, right? Your newspaper, your media, your magazine, your textbooks are all in English. So you're constantly surrounded by these concepts. It's not that you're just looking at them once and you have to learn them all at one go. By exposure and reading, your confidence in changing forms, etc., will increase. So the last possible way of changing genders is by adding an in, for example, in hero to heroine, or by adding an a, for example, from Sultan to Sultana, or from Tsar to Tsarina. Tsar is a king kind of a person, especially in Russia. Tsarina then becomes a queen or a female king. Yeah. Ballerina is another example of a word where the word is ending with INA or INE form. And another mostly a rare form is ending the word with a trix. So, for example, a dominatrix is a domineering woman. Okay, so sometimes, but very rarely, this trix form would be there. But most common form is by adding s or having a completely different word. Okay, that's it as far as genders in noun is concerned. Keep an eye out for observing this change of form when you're reading your magazines and newspapers and watching movies, etc. There might still be other forms that I might not have covered, or variations in the form, etc. So keep an eye out constantly for such things. Learn from observation rather than just sitting one day and learning from a formula book. Okay. Moving on to numbers in nouns, right? Observe the words car and cars, man and men. This should be fairly easy. When you say the word car, it means one car, and when you say the word cars with an S at the end, it means many cars, right? So when there is one of a number, it is considered singular noun, and when there are many of the thing, it is considered a plural noun, right? So singular is one in number and plural is many in number. This concept is fairly easy, and even going from singular to plural mostly is very easy. You simply add an s at the end, right? So brother becomes brothers, husband becomes husbands. Simply adding an s at the end makes it a plural. But again, in grammar there are a lot of rules and equal number of exceptions. So there is a little bit of an exception. When you have a word like class, and let's say if you were adding just an s at the end, it wouldn't really make a difference, right? Class, it will just become a sound at the end. To fix that phenomena, you don't add an s, you add an es. So class becomes classes. Similarly, tax becomes taxes rather than just tax, right? So when you have a word ending with s or sh or a ch sound, you convert the singular to plural form by adding an es, right? The similar logic goes for when the word is ending with o. Words like mango becomes mangoes, es is added at the end. Hero becomes heroes, es is added at the end. But at the same time, another exception would be not all words ending with o necessarily have an es. Some of them simply have an s. Can you come up with a couple of these words? That's a homework assignment for you. Another exception, and again by now the logic should be slightly clearer, though they seem like different rule. In all of them the s is being added, right? The variation is because you want to make the word sound better and smoother. That's why a variation of the suffix is happening. Otherwise the concept is still the same. So baby, the y gets removed and you get babies, ies is added to the end. Lady become ladies, city becomes cities, right? Again, most of it should be fairly easy. I'm just trying to be comprehensive here and covering it in case you haven't done it at school. If you have done it in school, your memory should be now triggering, or think of it as a revision of whatever you have done in school, right? But from my end, I just wanted to cover all possibilities. Another possibility is again adding of s is still happening, but to make the word better sounding, for example, when you have words ending with f, the f gets removed and replaced by v, and then you add an es. So wolf become wolves, right? Words ending with f or fe, this phenomena works, right? Not only an s is being added, instead of an s, an es is being added, and to replace the f sound in the word, a v is being added, so the word becomes smoother. Wolves, right? Otherwise the word would have been wolves, which is slightly off. I hope you feel that when you say it. Now this is a different kind of an exception, yeah, where the rule is totally different. Words like man, the plural is men, it's not mans. You don't add an s at the end. That's the most common error we used to make when we were children, right? Sometimes when we were learning, in the beginning when we were learning the language, we would add an s at the end to the man and say mans, and one of our friends would typically correct us and say it's not mans, it's men. Similarly, woman becomes women. The a is changed or transformed into an e. Tooth becomes teeth. Foot becomes feet. Yeah, and there will be more words like this. So keep an eye out for changing of singular to plural. What are the various ways of doing it? By adding an s, by adding an es, by replacing the f and then adding a ves, by replacing the y and then adding the ies, etc. Yeah, again, there's no point in going through a very long list of all possible words. Remember, if you're participating in the language, you're surrounded by it, right? From your news media, magazine, articles, books, etc. So observe these while they're happening in runtime in front of you in action, rather than learning them from a list. This is to understand the idea of what the structure is. Once you know the structure, then by observation also you can learn a lot on a daily basis. How do we make a plural in a compound noun? First of all, what is a compound noun? A compound noun is a noun made up of more than one word. So for example, word like son-in-law, stepson, maidservant. Son-in-law is made up of 3 words, son-in-law. Stepson, it looks like a one word, but it is made up of step and son. Maidservant is made up of maid and servant, right? So how do we make a plural out of it? We add the s to the core word, to the more meaningful word out of the options, right? So son-in-law becomes sons-in-laws rather than son-in-laws. Stepson becomes stepsons. Maid-servant becomes maid-servants, right? So this was fairly easy, right, as far as going from singular to plural is concerned. And how this plays out in our exam or testing is, it is checked along with our subject verb agreement understanding, right? Because when you have a singular noun, you should have a verb also in singular. When you have a plural noun, the verb also should be in plural. That's the basic idea. But sometimes confusions can come, right? And these are the possible confusion areas. So for example, these are some of the words where there is the singular and the plural form are identical to each other. Sheep is, when you have one sheep also you say sheep, and you have 5 sheep also you say sheep. You don't say sheeps, right? Deer, pair, dozen, thousand are other examples. I'm sure you'll find a lot of other words also. Then there are some words which have only the plural form, right? So scissors and spectacles, trousers, jeans, shorts, thanks, etc. Why? Because if you look at things like scissors and spectacles, they're made up of a pair of things. So by default, there are 2 involved, right? So therefore, always almost the plural forms is used. So you'll say scissors are, spectacles are, not my spectacles is, scissors is, right? My trousers are dirty. Even though it might feel like one thing, they're always in plural. So there are some words which are always in plural, even though in the physical world they might seem like one thing, right? Then there are some words which seem plural. And why do they seem plural? Because they are typically ending with an s. So by using that logic, you might feel that these words also are plural in nature. But in fact, if you inquire, these words are singular. You'll say mathematics is difficult or physics is easy, right? The news is good, the news is bad, right? Measles is a bad disease. You're not using an are, which is a plural form, you're using an is, which is a singular form. Looking at further possible ambiguity and the last possible category, we looked at collective nouns in the previous session. Now, collective noun was a single noun for a group of things, right? We learned in that session while discussing that mostly collective nouns are used as a singular. The army is moving, the team is playing, is being the verb for singular. But these are a couple of collective nouns which are used in the plural form. Cattle are eating, the people are going somewhere, right? Because even though this is a word for a group, the group is not coherent, it is not working as one thing or one identity. Therefore, the idea of using a singular does not work. We were using a singular in the collective noun because it was working as one thing, right? So these are the possibilities of singular, plural changing and what can cause confusion and exceptions, etc. Again, when we have covered verbs once and we come back to the discussion of subject verb agreement, these topics and these observations will come in very, very handy. So make sure you understand the basics here well and now. Okay, finally moving to cases. We saw in the very first session the basic structure of the English language is subject, verb, object, right? For example, in this sentence, Ram kicks Sham. Ram is the subject and Sham is the object. Ram is the doer of the action, the main character, and Sham is the receiver of the action or the thing on which the action is being executed upon, right? So when a noun is in the place of the subject, that is before the verb, it is known to be in the subjective case. When the noun is after the verb or in place of the object, it is known to be in the objective case, right? So subjective case when the noun is the doer of the action, and objective case when it is the receiver of the action, right? Now, the interesting thing or the easy thing about this is that in the English language, nouns do not change forms depending on whether if they are in the subjective position or in the objective position, right? For example, if I change the whole story around and I make it Sham kicks Ram, we see now that Ram is in the objective case, but still the word remains the same. Ram remains Ram, right? Whether it's in the subjective case or the objective case. But the idea is important. Why? Because say, let's say when we move to pronouns and we look at the pronouns I and me, the pronoun I is in the subjective case, the pronoun me is in the objective case. So the idea is fairly important. It's just that as far as nouns are concerned, the form does not change from one case to the other. But understand the idea well here, right? Let's look at another example. Now, Ram is in the room, right? And there are the two nouns here are Ram and room. Ram is obviously in the subjective case. Now there seems to be no verb and there is a preposition in, right? So prepositions also a lot of times require an object. So this time the noun room is working as an object for the preposition. So remember that there is a objective case after the preposition also, not only verb. The noun Ram is still in the subjective case, right? Another idea is that of a direct object and the indirect object, right? After the verb there might be more than one noun, so one of them will be a direct object and the other will be the indirect object. Okay, so for example, in this sentence, Ram gave Sham a coin. The coin is a direct object because I could have removed Sham and the sentence would have been Ram gave a coin, right? So the verb gave or the action gave is working on the coin, but the coin is finally being given to Sham, so that way around Sham becomes an indirect object. It is also an object, but it is an indirect object of the verb. Okay, so in the objective case, one noun could be a direct object and another could be an indirect object. The last case for nouns is the possessive case, right? Look at the sentence. Sham's wallet is on the table, right? This apostrophe and s is added to show possession, ownership, or a very intimate relationship, right? So whenever we want to say whose wallet is this, who's the owner of this wallet, or whom does the wallet belong to, in such cases, to show ownership, a noun is converted from the usual case to the possessive case, and it is done so by adding an apostrophe and an s, right? Yeah, again, fairly easy. You must have seen this idea very, very commonly. These are the rules for the formation of the possessive case. So when there is a noun, very, very simply, you can add a apostrophe and an s, and then you get to the possessive form. This is Ram's car, that is Ram's house, right? This is Kishan's wallet. So add an apostrophe s, and then it becomes an indicator of possession or ownership. The only problem being, as usual, there might be some exceptions based on spelling or sounds. So, for example, with the word like Ramesh, it is ending with this sh sound. So, when you say Ramesh's, it becomes slightly confusing. So, instead of that, you remove the s and just leave the apostrophe there. So, that indicates ownership. It is the same formula, is that just that extra s is being removed to make it sound better. Same thing works for goodness. Because there is an S sound at the word, the extra S after the apostrophe is removed, right? Idea could also be when there is a compound noun, right? Like, for example, father of the nation. It is one noun made up of different words. Where do I add this extra S? It is the the basic rule, the majority rule is it should be added to the last word, okay, of any such phrase. Another idea being, let's say, when two people are working as a team, let's say the music of Salim and Javed, right? So you would add an apostrophe only to one of them, which is at the end. But if these two people were working separately, you would say Salim's and Javed's music, or Salim's and Javed's wallet, right? But if they were working as one team, you would say Salim and Javed's production. Yeah, I hope you get the idea. One last idea with nouns, and another term being introduced here is the term apposition, or nouns in apposition. Apposition simply means placed next to, right? So look at the sentence, it'll be easier to understand by an example. So Dhoni, India's captain, made 55 runs, right? India's captain is a noun. Don't worry about the apostrophe and the possessive case. Look at the whole India's captain as one thing. What is it doing? It is renaming or rephrasing or giving even more information about a noun that was already given. I could have simply said Dhoni made 55 runs also. So India's captain is giving me more information about the noun, and it itself is a noun. So such a case is known as a case of apposition, or nouns being in apposition. Examples of the idea of apposition, not necessarily with a noun, is Mr. Sharma, who is a doctor, got injured yesterday, right? Who is a doctor is giving me more information about Mr. Sharma and is placed next to Mr. Sharma. The only difference being, in this case, who is a pronoun. So this is the case of pronoun in apposition. But right now we're thinking of the idea of apposition, right? So a noun placed after another noun to clarify that noun, Ram, the great man, right? So that is known as a case of apposition. So that's it for this session. We looked at genders, we looked at the numbers, and we looked at cases and rules of how to change genders, rules of how to change numbers, and how to form the possessive case, right? So I hope all of this made sense. Start observing this in the language around you. See you soon for the next session, and the next session is going to be on pronouns. We'll discuss cases, gender, person, types, categories, and observations, etc. See you soon.